This episode is brought to you by Truist. BB&T and SunTrust formed Truist with a shared purpose to inspire and build better lives and communities. With their combined resources, collective passion, and commitment to innovation, they're creating a better financial experience to help people and businesses achieve more. To learn more, visit truist.com. Welcome to Invest Insights. I'm Abby Maloney. I'm joined today by Charles Thomas, the Charlotte Program Director for the Knight Foundation. Charles, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Abby.
Despite 2020 being an incredibly challenging year, it did also offer the opportunities to reassess priorities and inefficiencies. With that in mind, how has the Knight Foundation's Charlotte's operations transformed its thinking as it relates to priorities for 2021?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple ways to answer that question. So one, first in 2020, it was about taking care of our employees, so shifting to virtual. And fortunately, I am a remote worker already because our headquarters is in Miami. So our local office connects to our headquarters has been through virtual means. But working from home, it was a transition and was different. Our organization nationally, recognizing that we were moving away from in person and understanding our ability to bring people together and provide information, we went to online programming. So we had not done that before. So on a weekly basis, Knight Foundation produces its own online content. And some of that content last year, which was critical, really was talking about issues around misinformation. And how to, in addition to a pandemic, there's the kind of the infodemic, and the crisis in journalism. And so we were able to talk about our three program areas, which is we talked about our local communities, which I represent in Charlotte. We talked about journalism, and we talked about arts. And in those conversations, we were able to amplify and highlight how our grantees and our partners are adapting all over the country, have adapted to COVID-19, to the response and reaction to the killing of George Floyd. All of that we were able to talk about. And then the third piece is we became very flexible, as well as kept our eyes open for changes for our grantees. One, flexible with our funding so that they could adapt, but two, highlighting and noting grantees that were leaning into and able to adapt with the times and giving them some extra boost of funding. So looking for innovative ideas during these times.
Were there any unforeseen difficulties that some of your grantees faced last year, and any creative solutions that you helped them with?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is, so for arts, it was, no longer having, for like museums, they couldn't have folks come into the building. So they weren't able to, revenues and ticket sales decreased. So once we got past kind of deploying dollars for emergency relief, which we deployed $500,000 to our local COVID fund, it was then looking at organizations like the Harvey Gantt Center in Charlotte, which is our African American Cultural Center and Museum, noticing how they pivoted to online programming. And every Tuesday, they were talking about what was happening and providing information to the African American community. And what we saw, without even, this is what they did, was that they were reaching a larger audience, not only in Charlotte, but regionally. And so we were able to provide some initial funding for them early on to continue to experiment with that and keep their programming going. And then that led to larger funding, $1 million worth of investment over 3 years at the end of the year. And so there was another arts group where they had to cancel arts programming, and they were able to launch virtual summer camps. And so connecting artists to youth through online and mailing packages. And then the last piece was the work we did in the historic West End around making sure small businesses that were pivoting during this time had access to grants.
And actually, let's talk about the West End. The Knight Foundation's work is obviously focuses a lot on the historic West End, which is experiencing substantial commercial and residential investment. How is the Knight Foundation and the local West End community working together to guide the recovery of this community? And how may this experience transform the West End in a post-pandemic future?
Yeah, so again, early on, one of our grantees, who's a partner in the West End, Queen City Metro, is a local online newspaper that serves the African American community. was on the front lines of helping our city recognize that the Black community was being hit harder by the pandemic. That led to some ministers, petitioning the county and healthcare to bring testing facilities to the community. So that was one example. And then we saw our partners working on the front lines of getting food and just supplies that the community needed in a rapid response. And then the next level that we went, that I was mentioning, was our partners, the Historic West End Partners, was able to work with small businesses in the district. And we partnered with a couple of corporations, Honeywell, Bank of America, Duke Energy, and Center City Partners, our downtown development agency, to put together a multi-million-dollar fund to grant dollars to small businesses in the Center City footprint, but night funds up to $500,000 went to small businesses in the historic West End, again, historically African-American community, where you have businesses that are very much small mom and pop shops, and they were able to use those dollars to, whether it's to change their seating, their landscaping to be outside, to building out e-commerce and technology solutions, to making sure that they were leaning into how food retail occurs in this era. And so we have great partners in the historic West End who are community-led, community-based organizations that help to find those opportunities. And again, you mentioned the growth, and it's been interesting because there's still development happening. And what we're seeing in the West End right now is in the commercial corridor, residentially, there's been quite a bit of change already, but in the commercial corridor, it's been moving slower. And during this time, we've seen a number of new developments and projects happening along the Beatties Ford Road corridor, the historic West End. And I'm excited to say that a lot of that new commercial development business flow is coming from Black developers, which Charlotte does not have that many Black developers in our community. And so to have a historically Black neighborhood being supported and moved forward by Black business owners, men and women who are trying to open up Black businesses, has been a good development that has happened during COVID. And again, Knight Foundation has been partnered, and excited that our grantees, like the Historic West End Partners, have been brokering those kind of deals. Even in the midst of an emergency, this kind of growth is still happening in the corridor, and I would say throughout all of Charlotte.
Let's talk about the other pillar that the Knight Foundation focuses on, which is journalism. I had the pleasure of meeting your colleague, Raul Moyes, in the Miami office, and we talked about the importance of journalism, especially now and you touched upon it before, with all the misinformation that was distributed last year in so many different ways. And it's never been more important to focus on the local and focus on local stories and local businesses and promote growth in various markets across the United States. How is that transpiring in Charlotte? And were there any particular developments from last year that is helping informing your plan for 2021?
Yeah, so journalism for years has been really going through dramatic shifts in a negative way. And the trend unfortunately continues. So in 2020 for us locally, again, what we saw that was interesting in the local news space, because we do believe that local news is critical to developing trust. So we saw a lot of challenges around misinformation, but we also saw great organizations like Queen City Metro, which again, I mentioned before, serves the African-American community. But we have in Charlotte, 2 years ago, we launched an effort called the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative. So it's a collaborative of 6 news organizations. So imagine your large newspaper partnering with the very niche organizations such as La Noticia, which serves the Spanish-speaking community, or Q Notes, which serves the LGBTQ community, or working together with our local NPR affiliate, WFAE. So all those groups, we have 6 of them working together, in 3 nonprofits that are not news organizations, such as the library, Queens University, and a group called Free Press, have came together to talk about solutions around affordable housing, which is what they were talking about before 2020. And then they pivoted into stories around COVID and the impact of COVID. And so they held a couple of events during the pandemic. One was immediately when we realized that we were locking down, they held a virtual event to try to understand in English and in Spanish what our community's information needs were. And we feel that models like the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, which is producing solutions-based stories, not just there's a problem, but solutions, and being able to leverage large institutions, let's call them legacy institutions, with smaller institutions and institutions that are serving niche audiences, has been has helped to amplify the power of local news. You know, we have like a local TV affiliate, WCNC, has done some really great programming. And one last thing I'll say about the Journalism Collaborative is they partnered with another night grantee, Charlotte Boom, which is an arts organization that typically puts on our Fringe Festival. And they created a graphic novel telling the stories around COVID. And so it was, again, a time where folks knew they had to adapt, had to be innovative. And what we saw was local news doing that, continuing to be the front lines of providing good, solid information for our communities, particularly our communities most impacted by COVID, and seeing new ways of reporting that allowed local news to leverage one another to reach new audiences and to do it in a way that's less costly.
Charlotte was among the major metro areas to receive funding from the Knight Foundation to expand public data analysis programs in urban planning. What is the vision behind this effort, and how well does Charlotte compare to other cities as it relates to smart city planning?
Ooh, don't ask me to compare. Charlotte always wins. Yeah. So we made some really interesting grants last year around public data and information and engaging residents. What you'll see as a thread through almost all of Knight's work is the importance of informing and engaging residents, making sure residents are part of the development of their city or the development of technology for cities. And
Right.
so we made a couple of investments. One was to the city of Charlotte, or to UNC Charlotte, to work with the city of Charlotte to create an augmented reality component to their 2040 vision plan. Okay. So if your audience is familiar with augmented reality, so you're able to actually, if you go to IKEA, you can decide, see what furniture is going to look like in your house. So imagine if you're able to, as a neighborhood leader, as a resident, to see the kind of buildings that are going to get built around in your community, and to give your opinion about that. And so the city has created, again, it's going to build an augmented reality component to their planning. The city did a really interesting pivot where they created they've been using gaming. They've gamified their engagement. And so everything, what we are interested in, and the Museum of the New South also did some really interesting work around augmented reality, where helping to understand the history and the past, bringing the past to life using augmented reality. Again, a way for residents to be engaged around their community and to be engaged in a city that's growing so quickly. The whole idea is, how do we make data easier, more accessible, and how do we tell stories with data so that community feels that they have a voice, that one, they understand, and then two, they can make really informed decisions and be engaged in a way that really advances their community's interests.
And with all this transformation, we can't ignore personal transformation. How have you personally transformed this past year?
Well, it's multiple ways. I'm Zooming a lot more, right? So one, it's been I have the privilege of working from home, and so being able to spend more time with my family, less time in a car, has been great. It's been hard to not be as connected to the West End that I like to be, and being able to be with our residents. It's given me an opportunity to develop a whole new workout routine, which I'm excited about. And again, I'm interacting with information in a new way, with things being online and being able to, I find that I'm able to participate in programming and events around the country, and being able to leverage that to bring thought leadership to our city, using platforms such as Zoom, to connect our community to information from around the country. So, and then the last piece I would say, definitely don't want to miss this point, but the killing of George Floyd and the response has had, a significant impact on our city, and I think on the country and the world, with the renewed focus on racial equity, understanding the disparities that are in our community. And so that's had an organizational impact on on Knight Foundation. But I would also say personally, for me, it's been kind of a renewal. Our work has always been about equitable development. How do we work in the West End in a way that benefits residents so they're participating and benefiting from growth and development, and that it's not just a case for displacement and the negative side of gentrification. But again, it feels that I find myself in more conversations internally as well as externally around how do we make our city, how do we make our organizations, how do we make the work that we do more inclusive, more equitable, and how do we dismantle the systems of racism that continue to slow down our city's growth, and slow down economic opportunity and mobility for all our residents. So that has been a new area of leadership that I've been able to step into, as well as that is kind of formed around us in the context of 2020 and 2021.
Great. Well, thank you again. That was Charles Thomas, the Charlotte Program Director for the Knight Foundation. My name is Abby Malone, and you've been watching Invest Insights. Charles, thank you very much.
Thank you, Abby. Take care.
Thank you again to our sponsor, Truist, for making this episode possible. Learn more at truist.com. And to listen to more episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in.